So I guess we'll get started. Good evening, welcome. I'm Liz Berard. I'm the assistant to the executive director, in other words, Gloria's assistant at Green Mountain Academy. And we welcome you all this evening for tonight's program with Martin Pazzani on Secrets of Aging Well. But before that, I just wanted to, we have a lot of great things coming up this fall, so I just want to talk about one in particular, which is happening right here in this room. It's Russia's war in Ukraine, and the speaker is Alan Stoga, which we're very lucky. He's the CEO of the Tallberg Foundation, which is based in Sweden, I believe, and he has since moved to Dorset, so he lives locally, but he's quite an expert. I encourage you all to Google Tallberg Foundation and see the interesting things they do. So he'll be here November 1st in this room at 5:30. I'd like to thank our media partner, GNAT-TV, for recording tonight's talk. They record many of our programs and broadcast them on the local cable channel and their website. I also want to thank BBA, Burn Academy, for having us here in this beautiful space. And as a reminder to the Zoom audience, if you have questions, if you could just type them in the chat feature, and I'll read the questions out loud. Please silence your cell phones. And now I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker. Martin Pazzani is a global business executive, a fitness expert, and mountaineer who has taken 100 million uphill steps. Is that correct?
It's more than that now.
Okay, it's more than a couple more than that now. Over 5 decades of travel and climbed major peaks on all 7 continents. As a fitness executive and entrepreneur, his companies are at the leading edge of using functional fitness and outdoor exercise to keep those of us over age 50 fit in both body and mind. As a mountaineer, he has summited the Matterhorn and Mont Blanc 5 times each, Mount Washington over 50 times, and was one of the early climbers of Mount Vinson in Antarctica. And he has just returned from a 100-mile trek across Nepal to the Everest Base Camp. So please give a warm welcome for Martin Pazzani.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased you came out tonight to hear this. I've given this talk, or a version of this talk, about 50 times, but this is the first time in front of people. All Zoom, because the book was published literally as COVID hit, and we couldn't do face-to-face. So this is a thrill for me, because it's the way I prefer to do it, and I'm really thrilled. I couldn't think of a better place to come back into the personal, real presentation space. So it's just a marvelous facility we have here. And again, so pleased to be here. Let me see if I can get this cranking. Okay, so yeah, I have a background in the fitness business. I've worked at big fitness companies, and I've got some fitness startups. I've been climbing around the world for over 5 decades, and what kind of caused this book to happen was the experience I had as an executive in fitness world, realizing that there were a lot of people, especially as you put on a few years, above 40, above 50, who had really very little interest in getting fit in a gym. And since, I kind of am known as a gym rat anyway, but I prefer the outdoors, and I thought I would merge both worlds and kind of share what I knew from both worlds, but also more importantly, to give people who weren't really interested in gym fitness a way to get really fit, and that's why this book was born. And then it was woven in with some stories, and I started hiking very early, but by today's standards, not that early. I started my son when he was about 5. The picture on the left here is my first hike of Mount Washington when I was 13 with my dad and brother. I've since done it, I think, about 55 times. And it's my favorite place. I was just there a couple weeks ago. It's woven throughout the book. But we'll talk about a variety of places as we progress. So you probably noticed hiking has become extremely popular in the last few years. We're going to go over some stats, but it's the 4th most popular outdoor activity after fishing and running and biking. I think it's probably in 3rd place now. This data is about a couple of years old. I kind of think it's past fishing myself. 58 million people as of 2020. I think that's the data. Yeah, 2020, which is almost double from what it was 15 years ago, which is remarkable. So there's this natural, I guess, pull towards nature as I think it's a counterforce. As we get more and more immersed in technology and living and looking at screens, I think we innately, a lot of people, gravitate towards being outdoors and wanting other ways to live. And that's why I think these numbers have really increased. I'll talk about a couple of the motivations here about the book here. The first one was, this is a place called the Rock Pile. It's the upper part of Mount Washington in New Hampshire, and it's basically a rock pile. When I was about 30, I was training on Mount Washington regularly, running up and down it. And I was training one day, coming down the summit cone, and I could see in the distance, this spot off in the center distance is called Lion's Head. It's a point. And I could see off in the distance someone running uphill at me. And this is before there was a thing called trail running. It was just, I'm going like, wow, this guy is literally running up Mount Washington. And I thought I was pretty fit at that age, but I knew I couldn't do that. So my brain started going. As the gentleman got closer, I was mesmerized by the fact that he looked older than my grandfather. And he came up to me and stopped, and he literally said, "Hey, Sonny," which is, I'll never forget. And I said, "How are you doing this?" He says, "Well, I live across the street. I've been doing this a couple times a week since I was your age, and I intend to keep doing it forever." And it was like one of those moments where you go, oh my God, I can still be doing what I love to do at his age, and if I take it really seriously, maybe even longer. Isn't that great? But it also left an indelible impression on why, the physiology of that, what was going on with that guy that kept him in that kind of shape, because it was remarkable. He ran past me after he said hi, and I watched him run up a steep slope after, he's 4 miles into this trail, and he was running. And I thought I was a super fit guy at age 30. I could not do what he was doing, and it really left an impression. I just had to know why. So that's one of the motivations here for the book. The next one is, you guys are all probably the same generation as me. Do you remember this little movie called Third Man on the Mountain? It was a Disney movie in the late 50s. Well, I saw that when I was a little kid. That's the picture on the left of James MacArthur. Remember Dano from Hawaii Five-0? He was the star as a kid in that movie, and it's about a little kid who climbs the Matterhorn, basically. And it made such an impression. I literally that night climbed around the kitchen cabinets, and my mother was really angry at me, but it stayed in my head as an objective for my life. And literally, 25 years later, I recreated that picture. And I didn't deliberately recreate it, but it must have been in my head because I literally took almost the same picture. Matterhorn has been kind of an obsession for me. I've climbed it 5 times. I've been there more than that. And it's one of the motivations for trying to figure out the impact of being outdoors, hiking, climbing, and longevity, which has become my adult obsession as an executive. My companies are all about longevity. And so that's, again, one of the impetuses for the book. Now, when I started the book, first thing I thought was, I have to talk to other people who are hiking and climbing. So I put out some feelers on some of the Facebook groups, and I was astonished because I interviewed over 100 people, all who had similar stories. And that's where I met Keld, who set this presentation up. Keld is middle right. And you can see the themes that kept coming back. Hiking made me fit. Hiking keeps me young. I never felt better. Hiking changed my life. That was kind of what I wanted the book to be about, and it was coming back I was hearing it from total strangers. So I spent a half hour on the phone with her. We were exchanging emails, and it was like, yeah, we've got to share this information. We've got to share this news because it's really profound. And so I began this project in 2018. And the other thing I wanted to mention is a lot of people will ask me, why can't I just work out in the gym? Well, having come from that business, I know it pretty well. I know that there are some people, no matter what you do, they don't want to work out in the gym for a variety of reasons. And I understand that. And what became fascinating to me was how to get those people fit. And I am convinced, as I researched it, that outdoor activities, especially hiking, is the answer. And it provides such an accessible way of being fit and thus longevity for so many people that, again, wanted to share that with more people. So the remainder of this talk is about what makes hiking so special. We're going to talk about some things that maybe you've never even thought about. And that goes way beyond what we talk about as fitness or health. The benefits are so broad. But you can see, this is the data. Hikers by year, it's closing in on 60 million. And the data ends at 2020. I bet it's another 5 million people or more hiking now, because once the pandemic data comes in, I don't know, you probably saw the cars at the trailheads throughout the pandemic. It's been crazy. And that just indicates more and more people are gravitating towards this again, because it's a counterbalance to the way we live now, which is technology and looking at screens, and we'll talk more about that. Outdoors is the opposite of that. And that's really one of the reasons why we have to get the word out. Now, I'll go over some basic reasons why hiking is so good for you. First of all, we like to eat, and as a result, some of us like to overeat, which means you want to burn more calories than normal. And sitting on the couch watching television is not the best way to burn calories. So if we look at the data here, treadmill or a flat hike, you're burning 170 calories. But if you're really interested in building layer by layer into a position where you can really call yourself an avid hiker, you can burn 1,000 calories per hour if you're walking up a steep hill with a pack. And so in between there is something more realistic, but there's calories burned by hiking is phenomenal, especially if you're carrying a pack. So that's just one reason to love it. And I do, because I like to eat. And I have a tendency to overeat, and during COVID I sure did, even though I was hiking a lot. And you know, we all, no matter how fit you are, if you're in the fitness business, burning calories is a good thing. So that's reason number one, and that's very obvious. Now, the other thing, and this is what most people don't realize, what sets hiking apart. Okay, there's roughly 2,000 steps per mile. If you're like me and you've got a Fitbit or an Apple Watch and you're tracking your steps, 2,000 steps per mile is what you're taking. Now, but not all steps are created equal. When you're on a treadmill, you're walking on a predictable surface. You're walking on a flat surface, and sure, you can angle a little bit, but it's still predictable. Every step, you don't have to think about it. You can actually zone out and watch television or listen to music. Most people do at the club. They're zoning out on their treadmill. However, they're missing a key benefit. When you're doing the same 2,000 steps on a trail, what's happening is your brain, your eyes, and your body are performing a very elaborate interaction that forces you to use a massive amount of brain cells to not trip and fall down, because it's not predictable. And that unpredictability while you're being physical is called dual tasking. Remember that term, because you're going to see a lot more of it in the future. Dual tasking is what happens when you're using your brain and your body simultaneously, when you're challenging them both. And that's what hiking does. Every step you take on uneven, unpredictable terrain is forcing your eyes to move around in many, many ways. Your brain has to process the angle, whether it's slippery, how the effort, how not to fall to keep your balance. And that process invigorates your brain. It builds what's called neural pathways. The more neural pathways you have, the better. We'll talk about that. But that's why hiking is such an enervating, great workout. But what I like best about it is there's a lot of ways to train your body. There's not that many ways to train your brain. And as you get older, training your brain becomes a very important thing, because what it does is it staves off cognitive decline. Eventually, we all slow down a little bit up here, but this holds it off. And that's the amazing thing that the research is showing is, and I believe it's true, I think hikers stay sharp. I think that's the real benefit. So, and then here's the other thing. You don't really think about it, and you think you're not getting as much of a workout downhill. Downhill actually uses different muscles and burns more calories, because you're fighting gravity. Uphill, yeah, you're taking big breaths. It feels harder. You're lifting yourself. But the act of going downhill forces you to have much more focus so you don't trip over yourself or fall forward. But also, you're using a completely different muscle group to fight gravity. And that's a great workout. That's why I've noticed it for years through the hills. You could always tell when someone has trained on a Stairmaster because they're really good at uphill, but they haven't trained the downhill muscles. They get fatigued. So, the real world, you have to come back down. So the downhill muscles are really, really important. And it gives you a better brain workout because you're focused on literally not tripping over yourself. There's an old adage, no one ever falls up, meaning you don't fall while you're climbing up. You fall downhill. 95% of the injuries you're hiking and climbing are downhill because you stumble over yourself or you slipped. And avoiding that, the mental focus is, again, dual tasking. It builds sharpness in your brain. So, yeah, downhill is critical. So here's the other thing. The elevated heart rate you get from walking uphill. It's a version of high-intensity interval training. High-intensity interval training is exceptionally good, not only for building brain health, and we'll talk about why that is, but heart health. And what that means is the red line is basically, I think that was one of my hikes, I don't remember, but peaks and valleys of heart rate. Peaks and valleys of heart rate. Like if you're jogging or walking on a treadmill, you go into this, you elevate your heart rate, but it's kind of flat. In hiking, because there's varied terrain or because you get fatigued, you take a rest, the heart rate goes up, the heart rate goes down, it goes up, it goes down. That's basically flexing the heart muscle. That continuous heart rate variation builds a stronger heart. It's a really important point that most people don't even think about. The difference between your resting heart rate and your maximum heart rate, the wider that is, the healthier your heart. So if your resting heart rate is 60, and when you're working out, you get your heart rate to 110 or 120, your heart rate variability is 50 beats per minute. But if you're fitter, your resting heart rate at 50, you may max out at 150, which means the variation is 100 beats per minute indifferent. That number means your heart is healthier. And that means you're probably going to have great cardiac health for a long time. So what you're after is that high intensity burst that you can control during hiking. The great thing about it is you get your heart rate up, you watch it on your heart monitor or your Fitbit, take a breather, take 5 minutes, get the heart rate back down. Then start walking uphill again. And when you vary that, that is such an important factor in training and getting yourself healthier faster. It's the variation that matters. Okay? And that's why most people can hike further and longer than they think. Just throw in the brakes. You don't have to, it's not a race. You don't have to go fast. You just come to the point where you need a little bit of a break. You rest for 5 minutes, the heart rate goes back down, then you do it again. Up and down, up and down. It's a great, great process. But here's why it's really great. There's this whole body of science that talks about how to create brain health. You probably don't know this, but when you work out, when you exercise, when your heart goes into the zone of between 66 and 75% of maximum, what happens is your body starts to create a hormone called BDNF. That stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF is one of the building blocks of new brain cells. So when you're exercising in that zone, you are creating the chemistry in your body to not only make you heart healthy, but brain healthy. You're creating the neurons that can go on to strengthen your brain. It's a phenomenal thing. And so it induces the growth of new brain cells that support cognitive function. And that's my favorite part of hiking, is its benefit on your brain. And have you ever come back from a walk or a hike and felt really energized? That's what's going on. Your brain is just alive because you've sent massive new amounts of blood and oxygen into your brain. Okay? By the way, if there are any questions here, we don't have to wait till the end. Please ask. We'll channel them at the end mostly, but this is such an important point. I want to make sure we give it its due. BDNF. You all have the power to do that. And you know, it's funny, all of us, when we were in school, we were told the same thing. You're born with a finite number of brain cells. No matter what you do, it's not going to go up. Remember that we heard about when we were in 5th grade? You can't get new brain cells. It was not right. You can. Brain cells at any age can be regenerated and created through this process. It's a phenomenal thing. Now, there's other elements to it. BDNF by itself needs to be told where to go. And it gets told where to go basically in two ways, through learning and through complex physical motion. So when you do complex physical motions, you're creating a neural pathway. The neural pathway sort of, the new neurons kind of create that new neural pathway, and it gives you a denser brain. We're going to talk about that in a second. But here's the analogy. The great thing about exercise is your body responds. There's this physiological process called angiogenesis. When you stress your body, when your heart beats faster, it actually increases the amount of capillaries you have in your muscles. They grow. So before exercise, you can see it's one version. After you've been working out, your capillaries multiply, which increases the amount of blood flow and oxygen to your muscles and to your brain. It's a phenomenal thing. And there's proof of it now that we're getting pretty sophisticated scientifically. You can see the top left picture is the cross-section of the thigh of a 40-year-old triathlete. The middle section is a sedentary 74-year-old, and you can see the muscle is very withered, and there's a lot of fat around that muscle. But through exercise and the process of angiogenesis, a 74-year-old triathlete's cross-section of their thigh looks very much like the younger person. And again, it's phenomenal to think that you don't necessarily have to decline the way generations before declined through aging. If you stay active, your body stays young, basically.
Quick question?
Yeah.
I didn't catch what BDNF stands for.
Brain-derived neurotropic factor.
Thank you.
You got it. There's a whole body of science. Just Google it. You'll be amazed. Okay, so we've got this angiogenesis process where through exercise, your body responds by growing new capillaries, improving the circulation, and making the muscles stronger, making every part of you stronger. Same thing happens in your brain. This thing called neurogenesis is the process of creating new neurons, new brain cells. So when you work out between 66 and 75% of your heart rate maximum, these new cells are flowing through your system and creating new neural pathways as you move and you learn. That creates something called cognitive reserve. Cognitive reserve is basically what you have as extra that as you age you can fall back on that will resist cognitive decline. The more cognitive reserve you build at a younger age, the more brain power, the more resilient your brain will be as you age. And here's kind of the way it looks. Again, analogous to the capillaries, your brain gets denser. Neural pathways are basically complex controllers that control the way your body moves. Do you remember, those of you who played sports, we used to talk about muscle memory? The fact is, there's no such thing as muscle memory. It's neural pathways. The muscles don't have a memory. It's a neural pathway that's controlling the complex motions of your body. The more neural pathways you've taught your body and your brain, the denser your brain, it becomes a healthier brain as you age. And that's, again, hiking does this as good as anything. Other things that build neural pathways, playing the piano, speaking a second language, those are all great for neural pathways. What they lack is you don't get your heart rate up quite the way you do. And heart rate helps it, accelerates the process. Okay? Now, we're going to get into the other areas. We just talked a little bit about physiology. I'm going to talk about the softer science part of this thing. What I like the best about hiking and climbing is the fact that you get up on top of things, the perspective you get from being up high. I just love it. I'm addicted to it. And that's one of the reasons that keeps me going back. When I was living in Manhattan and New Jersey, my favorite thing was to go to the top of the Empire State Building, and I didn't know why, and that's for that reason. I love being up high. You get a different view of things, but it's because, I guess I didn't realize it at the time, but it's waking up your brain. Your brain behaves differently when it's looking off into infinity. And you can get this at the beach too. I personally prefer this kind of vista that we have out this window here. It's a spectacular. Your brain is healthier when it's got the perspective of distance and interesting shapes and altitude. So that's number one. You feel better. But I want to talk about natural vision improvement for a second, because this is a very rapidly developing science that is more important now than ever because what's happened to us over the last decade, especially during the pandemic, is we all spend an incredible amount of time looking at various screens indoors. And not only do they give off the wrong kind of light compared to the sun, but they're flat and they're one-dimensional. They're not what we're used to. Our eyes like the depth. And when you're looking constantly at a small phone, when you're looking at a computer, when you're looking at your big screen TV indoors, it's a very flat world. And why this is an issue is because of the anatomy of your eye. There's complex muscles that control your eye. On the left, we see the muscles that control the position of your eyeball, obviously up and down, sideways. And then on the right, we see the muscles that control focus. That's the lens of your eye, and they're constantly working. And if you're just staring at a flat screen that's 12 inches in front of you, those muscles are basically atrophying. Have you ever experienced sitting in an airline seat for 6 hours, and you know how after you do it, you get up and you're a little creaky and you want to move? Staring at a screen for 6 hours does that to your eye muscles. And you're constantly feeling eye fatigue, you just want to move around. But the real antidote to that is time outdoors. You absolutely have to do it. These muscles, our bodies, are made to be outdoors. Did you know a recent study by the National Institute of Health showed that on average, Americans spend only 8% of their time outdoors. That's significantly less than it was a generation or two ago. And the impact, when you combine that with looking at screens, is that we're not getting the full range of inputs into our brain. And frankly, it's creating a ridiculous amount of eye problems. And that's now coming out in spades. Yeah, what a great day. This was a similar day, right? But that's the kind of thing that makes you, that undoes screen time. And here's the thing, what I've recently learned. It's infiltrated our lives in such a way. I mean, is there anybody here who doesn't have a smartphone who's not staring at it at least a few hours a day, and then you go back to your computer, and then you go back and you watch 2 hours of Netflix? It's created this exponential increase in myopia. And all of the scientific research is showing that screen time is the likely culprit. And then during the pandemic, it went off the charts because we all basically lived on screen. We did these presentations on screen, right? You wouldn't be here, you'd be watching me on Zoom. No offense to those of you who actually are watching on Zoom, but it'd be better if you were here. But you can't, but you know, it serves its purpose. It's just if you overdo it, that's the bad thing, right? So limited time outdoors is creating an exponential increase in myopia. Myopia is nearsightedness, and a lot of it's because your eye is not being used the way it needs to be used. It likes to look around. And again, we talked about how you create neural pathways and the complex interplay between your muscles and your eyes. That isn't happening when you're sitting at a computer focused on nothing. You're barely moving it. It's not focusing. It's not looking off into the distance. It's not moving around. So the cure to that eye fatigue is actually just getting outdoors. You've got to do it. And I suspect living where you all live, it's probably not 8% for this group, but it could be more, and that's what I would recommend, getting outside. Now, I also want to talk about something real new. I go out of my way to spend a lot of time outdoors. I have to work hard at it because I also, I have a job. I sit in front of a screen and I try to offset it by outdoors. I get away often. A couple weeks ago, I had the wonderful opportunity to be at Crater Lake in Oregon. And I talk about outdoor expansive. Has anybody been to Crater Lake? Do you know that yeah, that's right. It's remarkable. The expanse is incredible. It really relaxes your eyes. But what I wanted to talk about was the offset to this new concept called nature deficit disorder. It's an actual thing now. It's been trademarked, registered. A guy named Richard Louv has written numerous books about it. The acceleration of technology has created a hunger for being out in nature. Let's face it, it was only 100 years ago there was no electricity and we were spending daytime, we were outside a lot. Our bodies physiologically have not changed that much during that period. So we're still basically outdoor creatures that like to move, that like to be outdoors, that don't want to be staring at screens. So The downside to nature deficit disorder is it contributes to diminished use of the senses, attention difficulties, obviously you're not moving, accelerated obesity, higher rates of emotional and physical illnesses. But we're making ourselves sick by spending too much time on our screens. So, just wanted to make sure we're clear on that. Outdoors is the answer. Yeah. Other research shows that only a 2-hour increase can completely change your mood, your spirit, and the way you live your life. 2 hours extra a week. You can do that in 15-minute increments. You can do that in one day. You can do that spaced out over the week. A long walk outdoors boosts serotonin. Serotonin is an antidepressant, and as a result, your mood improves. Your energy gets better. You stay calmer. And again, it's not just the activity itself, the greenness, the colors. I got to put fall colors as well. Your brain wants to see those colors. I should tell you that we're going to talk about a little trip I did to Antarctica years ago. And aside from all the other benefits, the thing I noticed the most and that I felt instantly upon coming back was there was no green in Antarctica, nowhere. There's no green anywhere. And the moment you get back to a place where there's green, your brain is going, thank you. You can feel the green brain cells going, thanks. You need it. We need it. Now, who's ever taken a mindfulness course? There's plenty of places now that have sprung up that are giving pretty expensive mindfulness programs. You can make mindfulness retreats. And it's great. I think mindfulness, being able to relax, is wonderful. And if you don't know what mindfulness is, this is the official definition. It's a mental state achieved by focusing your awareness on the present moment, being present, while acknowledging and accepting your feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. It gets a little surreal there. And it's used as a therapeutic technique. Personally, I know a lot of people who don't get to that state of mindfulness through these mindfulness programs. I think hiking gets you there faster. I think you can't not be in the moment and focused and calm when you're hiking. You start off maybe thinking about work or something, but a mile up the trail, you're breathing heavy, your mind is worried about not tripping, and you're getting mindfulness out of that. And not only that, it's not a 30-minute mindfulness session that you're paying $100 for. It can be 6 hours, and it can be free. And to me, that's a much deeper mindfulness than you get out of a mindfulness session sitting in a small, enclosed space indoors with a mindfulness trainer, which again has some value. But hiking is exponentially better for mindfulness. I love this quote. I don't know if you know who Heinrich Herr is. Heinrich Herr wrote 7 Years in Tibet. He's a wonderful author and mountaineer. And he talked about it even then before it was a term. You have focus. The light becomes sharper, the sounds are richer, you're filled with the deep, powerful presence of life. That is what we're after here, and you can get to that through hiking. It's an amazing thing. I'm a big fan of it. It becomes addictive. Now, I just want to take a little side thing, because I get this question all the time, and it's, can I hike in the rain? The answer is, not only can you, you should. And all you have to do is just get good rain gear, and it changes everything. I'll tell you why you should. Some of my greatest hiking experiences have been in the rain. And the picture on the right, I had a memorable, phenomenal experience at the Flume in New Hampshire. Got right literally into the Flume Gorge. And I'm sure some of you have been there, right? It's a great, great spot. But literally, the clouds opened up. The rain was as heavy as I've ever seen. Unfortunately, I knew it was going to rain, so I had an umbrella. That blue thing is my umbrella. And thunder and lightning. And so you're in this enclosed space, thunder, lightning, rain. The sensations were incredible. And I think that's why I actually love hiking in the rain, because you're feeling things you don't feel otherwise. It's really making your brain come alive. But there's also an effect that most of you know, this smell. It's called petrichor. That smell where after it hasn't rained for a while, raindrops you start to smell something in the air. It's different. And that's because water on dry ground and on dry plants releases into the air this bacteria, this combination of chemicals that you actually smell. And at the same time, the falling rain is clearing the air of dust, pollen, and microbes. You're breathing really supercharged, ozone-charged air while it's raining. And I don't know about you, but I can feel it. I feel better hiking in the rain. It's a wonderful thing. So all you need, big umbrella, some rain pants, and don't be afraid about hiking in the rain. Don't not do your walk or your hike because it's raining. I highly recommend it. Now, some other things. Overcoming challenges. Anybody have a life of no challenges? Life is challenges, right? I am certain, and there's a great amount of literature written about this, that hiking strengthens your ability to overcome life's challenges because you're creating a physical analogy to that. Every little hike you do, you are breaking it into small pieces and you're going up a cliff, or you're going to the top of a ridge, or you're going up to the top of a mountain. You start to feel like you can conquer things, like you're empowered. Your self-esteem, your self-efficacy increases if you can overcome these obstacles on the trail. And that translates to the way you live your life. I think that's a good thing. We all, we got a lot of stresses through work, family, whatever, and I think hikers are able to overcome them because you've learned in the physical world how to overcome these challenges. We'll talk a little bit more about this. Anyone ever experienced a false summit? There's plenty of places where when you think you're to the top and then you realize there's another top over there and another top. Anybody ever hiked the Franconia Ridge? It's really crazy. There's 4 false summits. You keep coming to you think you're at the end, and then you go, oh, I got another 300 feet. And then and on and on. And this happens everywhere. I experienced this in Nepal to a degree I can't even begin to tell you. It was unbelievable how the ups and downs. You feel like you're getting somewhere, and then, oh my God, I'm barely where I thought I was. But again, that's analogous to life. Working on a project at work, doing something in your house, you think you're done, and then you discover you got a whole nother area to work on. And again, I believe hiking empowers you and strengthens you to overcome the false summits we face everywhere. Because if you can do them in the physical world, you can definitely do them in your own life. It's a strong effect. Now, I'm going to push this a little further. In the book, I write about this concept called comfort zone. And you've probably heard this quote. It's a meme everywhere. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. It's sort of true. And I think I've spent, without knowing it as a term, a lot of my life pushing the comfort zone. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business person. I like to do new things and get out of the norm, not cookie cutter. And so I write in the book, your life shrinks or expands with your willingness to accept risk, to stretch the limits of your comfort zone. And it expands exponentially if you understand the concept of a crucible. You know what a crucible is? It's trial by fire. When you put stuff into a fire, what comes out on the other end is often different. And so it starts out testing yourself in a comfort zone. If you get good at it and you push it really hard, I call it a crucible. And it builds some really great things. Here's a little diagram I've been playing around with. So what's the comfort zone? It's the area where you're safe, you're unstressed, and the downside to it is you get complacent in a comfort zone and there's no growth. So if you're interested in growth, of which I am, and I hope many of you are, you push your comfort zone. And when you push yourself out of the comfort zone, what happens is at first, you see the way this exhibit kind of expands. There's a little bit of fear and discomfort, but then you get used to it and your comfort zone expands. Then you do it a little bit more and you keep pushing, and by the end of however long you want to make it take, you have a bigger comfort zone. That's a good thing. It's growth in your physical and your cognitive and your personal and your spiritual world. Getting out of your comfort zone is, I think, an important part of longevity. Because longevity is about not only being healthy, but it's about constantly learning and challenging yourself and not ever giving in and stopping. And I think it's a great concept. So I've done it instinctively for a long time before I learned these terms. I want to tell you about a crucible I put myself through a long time ago. I mentioned I'd been to Antarctica, and I was on an early expedition to a mountain that practically has never been climbed. And the way this works is we got dropped off on a glacier in the middle of Antarctica, 4 guys by a plane, dropped off on the ice, and the plane takes off, and there's 4 guys, close as human beings, maybe 200 miles at a different camp. So we're really You have to be self-reliant. You have to be confident, you have to be skilled, you have to be comfortable that you're not going to freeze to death, you'll be able to cook, you'll be able to survive, you're not going to have a breakdown by being so alone. And by the way, it's 50 below zero most of the time, so you have to be competent in the cold. So this is 33-year-old me talking now. That wasn't hard enough for me at the time. So I decided that one day I was going to go by myself. I left my 3 companions. I walked 5 miles up a glacier. That little gap in the snow bottom right is where I climbed up, and then I walked along that ridge by myself to that X. And I wanted to be completely alone in a place where I was already pretty alone, and to see how it felt to be completely self-reliant in an extreme environment. That was it. That day I can remember. By the way, that's my boot hanging over the edge of that cliff. Where the X is, that's my boot. And it's a 500-foot drop down to the glacier. I wanted to feel what that felt like. And it was pretty amazing, actually. I feel I can call that back still to this day, what that sounded like, what that felt like. And I think that simple act, I spent like 2 hours sitting in that spot, 50 below zero. If I fell or if I slipped over the edge, no one would ever know what happened with me. I would just disappear, boom. And I wanted to feel what that was like. And after that point, I walked back down, went back to my companions, and it was, at the time, it was a crazy experiment. But I call back on that, and I think to myself when I'm having a tough day, if I could get through that and not be too daunted by it, I can pretty much get through just about anything. So I'm not suggesting you do that. It was pretty extreme, pretty stupid actually. But there are other ways of getting to this point, but this is an extreme one, and we'll talk about that. I still do it, by the way. This was 2 weeks ago. Mount Washington, been a magnet for me. Huntington Ravine is considered to be one of the hardest trails, or maybe the hardest trail in the Northeast. It's kind of a cliff. But the first time I did it with my brother was 1982, that's on the left. And I did it in September again. I've done it about 10 times, but I did it again to prove that I could still do it. I wanted to get out of my comfort zone. You know, I'm 66 now, I'm not 28 or 25. And I thought, if I can still do what I did then, I'm okay. And so, by the way, the place I'm standing on the left is where the arrow is on the right. I was literally at that cliff. So I like taking before and after pictures, and I take lots of pictures, so I've got tons of these. In any case, I got through it. It was hard. It was harder than I remember it, because now I'm a lot older. It was really steep. I was totally by myself. If I fell, and there's plenty of places where you can, I guess somebody would have found me because I carry a GPS device, but it would have been ugly. In any case, I came back from that, and I still feel that. I was pretty jazzed, really pretty proud of myself that I was able to overcome that and do the hardest trail in the Northeast at my age, by myself, unsupported. It was kind of cool. So here's the point. You don't have to do these exact things to get the same feeling. The way I refer to it is find your own peak. There are challenges. You get to these extreme challenges layer by layer by layer over the years through experience, and they don't seem as daunting at a point. But I started out on the left, walking little trails when I was in Boy Scouts with my dad, walking through the Connecticut foothills. You gradually move, and so there is literally, just outside our door here, there's something for every level of ability. There's the Rails to Trails program, which is basically railroad tracks that have been converted to walking and hiking trails. They're phenomenal places to start. And you can build that same self-efficacy on a flat trail if that's your goal. If your goal is going from being able to walk a couple of miles to being able to walk 10 miles on the flat, and then 10 miles with a backpack, that is the same process. There's something for every level of ability here. You don't have to sit on a cliff in 50 degrees below zero in Antarctica to experience what I'm talking about here. So as I was writing the book, I realized there was this certain joy to the people I had interviewed and that we all experience outdoors. And I'm a big user of social media. I hate to say it, but on the screen time, I probably do too much, but I have some businesses that are dependent on social media, so I get dragged into it. And there's this thing called fear of missing out, FOMO, where you see your friends in Belize, and then you see your other friends somewhere else on a luxury yacht, and you develop this fear of missing out. And I thought to counter that, when you get outside, express yourself as Jobo, the joy of being outside. And I've been using that as a hashtag here and there. I should do it more. But what really made it happen is the picture I showed at the beginning of the hikers I had interviewed. There's a certain pose many of them take, which is what you see right there. It's this. They get to the top of something and everybody is expressing themselves in a certain way. That's the joy of being outside. And I was so excited by that. I think those pictures are what caused me to think about this. In fact, here it is again. Look at all these pictures of people going like this. When I asked 100 people to send me their pictures of their hiking, of the 100, 70 sent that same picture. It was yes. And it was, to me, that's what they're after. And that's why hiking changed their life and hiking healed them. And that's why they go back for more. And again, that's why I wrote the book. Now, I like to end, we're almost done. I like to end everything with, if you're thinking about this, you should know that there are certain precautions you have to take. And by the way, I usually start up by asking how many people actually are hikers. Probably everybody here is a hiker walk. Yeah, good. So you know the 10 essentials, right? I recommend, if you're going to do this, definitely be aware of the 10 essentials. I actually have 15 essentials. Notice number 9 is rain gear for me, always. But a couple things. I always carry a GPS locator now. The last thing I want is to be the subject of a missing persons report and you trip and you hit your head. You know, you want people to know where you are. So my advice is, if you can, get a GPS locator if you're going to go out, especially if you go out alone. And I hike alone a lot. Duct tape is a mandatory in life. You got to have it with you all the time. I always bring extra socks. I bring paracord, and I use poles. There's always a big debate on whether to bring poles or not. I prefer poles, 4 points of contact with the ground. But much better on the downhill. And the last thing I want at my age is to slip and hit my head on a downhill. We don't need that, so I don't care. I use poles. A lot of people think it's not macho. I use poles. So 10 essentials. Don't go out without them. And the 15 is even better. So for what it's worth, the book is actually, I went over to the Northshire bookstore, signed a bunch of them. I don't travel with the books. So if you're interested in the book and you don't have it, there's cards on the table. Pick one up, it'll show you how to get it on Amazon. But they actually are signed at the Northshire bookstore. Thank you to the folks at Green Mountain Academy for getting it there. And now we are to the Q&A section here. So for those of you who are on social media, you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram. You can email me if you have questions that you don't want to ask now. I have a website. It's called getoutside.online. All that is listed on the little tab. And for me, the most incredible thing was, for a brief period of time, this book was #1 ahead of Into Thin Air, Alive, and Sky Below, three of my favorite outdoor books. Didn't last long. They have a lot more staying power than I do, but I was really thrilled that when we introduced the book, and they have way bigger promotion budgets too. When we introduced the book, it went to #1 pretty quickly. So that's the story. I'm happy to stay as long as you want to answer questions or hang out and talk, but feel free. And yeah.
I read the book and I thought it was excellent. The story is terrific. It is inspiring, and I had a lot of questions, so I narrowed it down to like 83.
All right, you got it. I got nowhere else to go, Sal.
Diet. In the scheme of this, how important is diet to you? Not in terms of how much or how little you eat, what you eat.
Yeah, it's a great question. A couple of things. One, I had 2 chapters on nutrition and diet in the original book, and it got too long and my publisher took them out. They're going to be in book 2. Book 2, which I started already. But so to really answer the question, when I was 30, it was completely irrelevant and unimportant. I ate whatever I wanted and didn't care. I was burning so many calories it didn't seem to matter. Now, critical. Yeah, as you age, you can't, you got to be a little more careful. So I've toyed with various approaches and what works best, and we talk about that just a little bit in the book. Low-calorie Mediterranean diet is the best for everything. It's the best for your brain, as long as you're getting enough calories and nutrients. Yeah, that's what I recommend. I've occasionally done keto with a little extra protein, but that seems to be what works for me. You have to experiment. I think everybody's physiology is a little bit different, so what works for me may not work for you. What works for a man may not work for a woman. What works for someone who is a carnivore may not work for someone who's a vegetarian. I think you got to experiment, but I have learned that it's vital that you get it right. It gives you extra energy, it keeps the weight down, and that's what you need. That's one, you got 82 to go. Give somebody else a turn. Anybody else have a, yeah.
So that was a great talk. The talk was inspiring as well. So one of the things you said, it seemed a little counterintuitive to me about that you use more energy going downhill than uphill. Could you comment on that a little more?
Listen, I've not studied it myself. I've read studies. The studies say you actually burn more calories going downhill. I can't explain the physiology of it, but I know it has to do with fighting gravity is harder than stepping up.
Okay.
Especially if you're wearing a pack. And I think this is, again, I have read this. When you're carrying a pack, the downhill step is exponentially accelerated in terms of how much energy it requires to not fall. So you can be taking, if you're carrying a 30-pound pack, it's putting 8 times the stress on your thigh, and on different muscles on your thigh. And it's also using muscles you don't normally use, because how often do we walk downhill? So I think it's a combination of those things.
Okay. Thank you.
I should look that up. That's a great question. No one's ever asked that question before. I have to dig into that a little bit more. Thanks. Go ahead.
Jack LaLanne,
Yeah.
who I thought was wonderful,
Yeah.
was on a Larry King interview years ago. And I'd like to comment on what he said. He said the day ever comes, because he believed you must eat right and you must exercise. And he used to do 2-hour workouts. He said you don't need to do that. 30 minutes is fine as long as you push yourself. But he said the day ever comes that I get diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, I'll know it was my fault. Because somewhere along the line I went against the laws of nature. What do you think? What do you think of that?
Yeah, you read the book, so you know I'm a Jack LaLanne fan. And coming from the fitness industry, doubly so a Jack LaLanne fan. Jack LaLanne was business partners with my old company, Bally, so I know a lot about him. He's a personal hero. And you keep in mind, you're talking about a guy, I think he was 90 when he pulled a fleet of boats across San Francisco Harbor by doing breaststroke with a yoke in his mouth. So the guy was a unique physical specimen. But it wasn't all nature. It was nurture. He lived a certain way. And his point of view, which I espouse completely, is we don't age and slow down. We slow down because we don't. If you stay active, you don't have to give in to the downside as quickly of aging. You can offset it through physical activity. And again, that's the runner I met when I was on Mount Washington. He was 75 running uphill at a fast pace. I see that all the time in the hills. I saw that in New Hampshire last week. I'm sure I'll see it tomorrow. It's remarkable that one of the things that I'd hoped this book would do is get that point across, is you can take charge of the way you age. You don't have to give in to that the way you did. Generations ago, my grandfather and my father were not fit in their 50s and their 60s, and I think they passed way too soon because, well, first of all, they smoked, which was, once we get rid of that, you're solving a lot of problems, but they weren't active. And so if you stay active, you offset the decline of aging. And it's a choice you make. Right? You can do it. And that's what I wanted to do.
So my husband and I love hiking. And one of the things I've noticed as I'm getting older and hiking more is our problems with my knees.
Yeah.
And I have my sticks.
Yeah.
But what do you wear anything special? Do you have any issues with?
No, I'm pretty lucky. I don't. I should tell you, though, that my younger brother with the same genetics as me has had 2 knee replacements, and he's a hiker too. So I don't know what it is. Some people just have knee trouble sooner and hip trouble sooner. I think my gait is okay. I train, and I do try, as much as I'm anti-gym, I do train in the gym quite a bit, and I think that helps. Absolutely. Yeah, but if you're having problems, you got to be diagnosed. I can't, I'm not a, there's lots of, the complexities.
What to do?
Yeah,
do you
listen,
wear-
there's plenty of knee braces. I don't, but I do use poles, and I know that makes a big difference on the downhill. That's one of the principal reasons, is it takes a lot of the stress off the downhill.
No, but I think you made a good point. I think going to the gym and strengthening the muscles around that area will help keep it in place.
I think that's part of it. And again, a personal trainer and a medical person can really diagnose your issue and give you specifics, but I think it's a combination of not overdoing yourself, increasing gradually, and a little bit of either physical therapy or physical training can overcome some of that.
I have a story of duct tape, how it saved us. We were hiking the AT, and my toes were killing me.
Oh, yeah,
and
sure.
I couldn't walk, so my husband took the duct tape and tied 2 of them together.
Perfect.
It was great.
Perfect. I not only do I carry it in my pack, I've wrapped my poles with duct tape. Yeah, I think that's a classic trick, right? I think I had that in the picture. Did I have that? Yeah. Duct tape is like the miracle thing. You got to have it in your car too. I mean, you just never know.
Yeah. Our water bottle.
Yeah, I did that too. Yeah. Great. Sure.
What's your attitude about jogging?
Mixed. I'm not a jogger. I know a lot of people who are runners, joggers, who had a lot of knee and hip problems as they got older because they were high mileage marathoners when they were younger. I think you can overdo it. I think done properly, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I just wouldn't overdo it. I don't like it myself. I like to put a pack on my back, and I'd rather walk briskly with a pack on my back than run. I also do some biking and swimming, but I'm not a jogger. But again, some people have an excellent running gait, and that's a great training. It's obviously aerobic, and but I think running uphill is better. But yeah, it's mixed. Are you a jogger?
Yes.
Yeah, then keep jogging. Your knees okay? Are your knees okay?
Yes.
Keep jogging.
Okay.
Yeah. It's. I mean, you can't. Switching to a different presentation. I used to in the fitness industry often talk about Jim Fixx, who you probably know was promoted the complete book of running and then died of a heart attack at age like 43 from jogging. So I use that when I'm in a crowd that doesn't like jogging. But again, some people love it. Just don't overdo it. Okay. And don't jog on pavement. Right? Okay. Right? Yeah, Kel.
Something I told you a little while ago, I started hiking when I was 60, which was getting to be quite a long time ago now. And I had a couple of experiences lately that made me feel really good about what I'm doing with the hiking and so on. I went for my annual physical. It was February of this year, and the doctor went through everything, and then at the end she says, you know, Kel, you might be old, but you're living you're much younger than your body is, was number one. And number two, last time I went for my eye exam, at the end the doctor said, you know, this is remarkable, your eyes are 15 to 20 years younger than you are.
That's okay. So we talked about BD,
good, right?
We talked about BDNF, and we talked about using the eye muscles and how it interacts. But what you may realize is your optic nerve is actually an extension of your brain, grows out of your brain. So when you're building BDNF, one of the places those neurons can land is your optic nerve, which makes your eyesight better. You can actually improve your eyesight. A bunch of ways to do that, but I had the same thing happen about 2 years ago. I went for an eye exam and they said, your eyes got better. At your age, that's impossible. I said, well, I guess it's because of fitness. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Yeah. Any more? Sure.
Do you have children and do they follow your example?
One does, one doesn't. My daughter was not interested in hiking or being cold. My son just, my son, My son went to Kilimanjaro with me when he was 12. We hiked all over the world, and he just got back from hiking Zermatt to Chamonix, 100 miles through the Alps. So he does, and he moved to Oregon so that he could be amongst the hills. So one does. Yeah.
Did you ever have a fall or something serious happen to you when you were hiking?
No, I'm really lucky. I've never been seriously injured. I broke my arm on Mount Washington, but it was minimal. I slipped literally when I was standing still, wasn't even climbing and hiking. I just slipped, and I landed badly and I broke my arm. Other than that, I'm really lucky, really lucky.
Well, that sounds like it's a matter of chance, and you lucked out by being the one person who didn't get cancer from smoking cigarettes. But luck versus being careful where it's important, and being aware, the mindfulness thing that you mentioned, because it is easy, even hiking in beautiful areas, to space out.
Yeah.
At least I find myself thinking about other things than that. But staying focused and avoiding getting hurt, it's awareness, I think, was a big part of your luck.
I think it is. I think it is. Listen, I have no interest in. At one point, I took extreme risks, and that really sharpens your ability, your focus. I mean, but yeah, I'm not at this point interested in getting injured. I'm much more cautious now, and I think that's probably good for everybody our age, just to really take it easy. You're a little more brittle, and it's harder to recover, right? So, but yeah, pretty lucky so far. Sir.
Can you just talk about the time, or is it just a matter of how quickly you get your heart rate elevated and the length of it?
What do you mean by time?
How long you should hike in?
Yeah, again, it varies on your level of fitness and what you're starting from. Sal, I guess it was you, said 30 minutes, right? Just now. Getting your heart rate up, there's a whole new body of science that says it's about short bursts of high intensity that matters. So a 30-minute brisk walk is a good place to start. That gets the heart rate up, and then you get comfortable with what that is. I'm a big fan. I monitor everything. I wear a heart monitor when I work out. I wear I do all that, and so I know what's going on. And if you're just getting into this, you calculate your maximum heart rate. It's 220 minus your age. That's kind of where you should be, working out. When your watch tells you you're in that zone, you're making progress. So the good thing about it is you just stop when you're not. Take it easy. So yeah, it's a gradual thing. I mean, there are people my age who will be on these 20-hour jaunts around the Franconia Loop and whatever, and I'm thinking, oh my God, that's a level of intensity that generations ago you could not have fathomed. But people are doing that, and they get there layer by layer, gradually over the years. So, but it all comes from monitoring your biometrics. I think it's or being very in touch with how you feel, little by little, step by step. Yes.
Have you not walked someplace that you still want to walk on your wish list?
Oh yeah, it's a big world. Yeah. I can't even tell you that the list is very long. In the book, I list the top 10 things I still need to do. I got to do Machu Picchu at some point, I think. Yeah, that walk through Spain sounds kind of cool. Yeah, El Camino. Yeah. There's so many options, right? Yeah, I haven't done the Pacific Crest Trail. I mean, that's, there's all kinds of places that, I never go on a trip where I don't see something, I got to do that, So, yeah, little research. Google is your friend.
Well, come back and do the long trail.
Yeah, I know. That's on my list too, Kel, as you know, that is. Yeah, long trail's on my list. Kel, when did you do that?
That was about 10 years ago.
10 years ago?
I guess.
Yeah.
It took us 6 years though. We did a week a year for 6 years in a row in 6 different months. It was just planned that way.
Yeah, well, I hear it rains a lot though, which is, I have to, that's my excuse for hiking in the rain, right?
It wasn't bad at all, but it's okay.
Yeah.
The Appalachian Trail's like 2,000 miles or something, from Georgia all the way up. Did you ever do that?
Yeah, no, I don't, I never had 5 months off, It's a long time. I might do that, when I retire. My son did it, but I've never had that chunk of time.
Goes right by where we live.
Ah, cool. Yeah.
You mentioned something in the book that I thought was fascinating. that if you are really fit, if you really work out, when the time comes, we're all gonna die, you actually go pretty quickly.
Yeah,
Rather than weeks, months, and years. Teddy Roosevelt, I paid the way he died. He was very active, he went to sleep, he didn't wake up.
no, what you're talking about is the concept of compressed morbidity, which I am very much a proponent of. And basically, compressed morbidity means live long, die fast. That's the opposite of the way everybody in my family went generations ago, which was you start to get sick when you're 50, then you have 12 things that go wrong, and by the time you're 68, not only are you really unhealthy, but your family is taking care of you, your medical bills are through the roof. Far better to be active right to age 95 and then and a week later, to drop in your, on a hike or something. Compressed morbidity, that's a term that I think is going to get more popularity. Again, it's part of the way you take care of the way you age, as opposed to that long, slow, expensive, gradual decline of aging, which I'm determined to fight that myself. That's one of the things in the book that you picked up on, compressed morbidity.
The benefit of being physically fit.
Totally. Not only are you living a better life, but you're not, number one cause of bankruptcy in people above 70 is medical bills. You're healthier, right? Good point. Well, yeah.
There's book one on the top of the cover.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you're working on the cookbook, so to speak,
Yeah.
or other items. Just talk about book number 2.
Book number 2 is more going to be how-to. This was the philosophy of why to hike, the brain science, and a little bit of adventures. Book 2 is going to be basically the get outside workout. It's going to be, and it's in partnership with a climber, hiker in Denver, and who's a certified personal trainer. And we're collaborating to create here's what you should be doing to be healthier on your knees. Here's how to train for hiking. Here's the workouts. Here's the program to become a better hiker and to enjoy yourself in the outdoor more. And a few more stories, and we're going to interview some more people and what they did to get fit. Yeah, I think that'll be probably mid-year next year.
We might live to see it.
I hope so. I hope so. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.